Today, I want to talk about the battle we often don't admit we're fighting, the one against ourselves. It's not us versus the world, not us versus our circumstances, but us versus the version of ourselves that holds us back. In this battle, there's no referee, no external scoreboard. It's fought in the quiet moments in the mirror, in our thoughts, and in our hearts. We all have that voice inside, don't we? The one that whispers, "You're not enough," the one that magnifies our failures while diminishing our wins. It tells us to play small, to stay safe, to avoid risk, because failure feels too heavy to bear. But what if we chose courage over comfort? What if we stopped letting fear write our story and started showing up for the person we know we're meant to become? The truth is, growth doesn't come from self-punishment. It comes from self-compassion. It's about standing in the arena of life, bloodied and bruised, saying, "This is me. I'm not perfect, but I'm here and I'm trying." We must own our stories, the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's only when we stop running from ourselves that we can find clarity. Vulnerability isn't a weakness, it's the birthplace of resilience. When we admit our struggles, we create space for transformation. So what does it mean to win this battle? Winning doesn't mean silencing the critical voice. When we think of battles, our minds often jump to external conflicts, fights with others, struggles against circumstances, or the obstacles that life throws in our way. But the most challenging battle, the one that defines who we truly are, doesn't happen out there in the world. It happens inside of us. This is the inner battlefield, the constant tug of war between who we are today and who we aspire to become, between our fears and our courage, between self-doubt and self-belief. It's not always loud. In fact, it's often quiet, unfolding in the shadows of our thoughts and the stories we tell ourselves about who we are and what we're capable of. Think about it. How often do we sabotage ourselves before we even start? We set goals, dream big, and then that voice kicks in. You're not good enough. What if you fail? You don't have what it takes. That voice is relentless, isn't it? It knows exactly where to hit us, our past mistakes, our insecurities, the times we fell short. It's like having a critic who lives rent-free in our heads. But here's the truth: that voice isn't our enemy. It's a reflection of our fears. It's the part of us that's terrified of change, of rejection, of stepping into the unknown. And while it may feel like it's trying to hold us back, it's really trying to protect us. It's the part of us that wants to keep us safe, even if that safety comes at the cost of growth. The inner battlefield is where the real work happens. It's where we have to challenge those thoughts and rewrite the narrative. We have to learn to recognize that the voice of self-doubt isn't the voice of truth. It's just fear wearing a mask. So how do we fight this battle? Not with fists, not with anger, but with courage and compassion. We don't defeat ourselves by suppressing our fears or pretending they don't exist. We win by listening to those fears, understanding where they come from, and then choosing to act in spite of them. It's not easy. Some days the battle feels overwhelming. There are moments when we'll want to give in, to let the voice of self-doubt take the wheel. But every time we stand up to that voice, every time we say, "I hear you, but I'm choosing to move forward anyway," we take back a little more of our power. The inner battlefield is also where we discover our greatest strengths. It's where resilience is born. Because every time we push through fear, every time we rise after falling, we become stronger. We start to see that we're not defined by our failures or our fears, but by our willingness to keep going. And here's the most important part: this battle isn't about winning or losing. It's about showing up. It's about being willing to face yourself, to confront the parts of you that feel broken, and to keep trying. Victory doesn't mean silencing every doubt or fear. It means not letting them stop you. The inner battlefield is not a place of defeat. It's a place of transformation. It's where we become who we were always meant to be, not by erasing our fears, but by learning to walk alongside them hand in hand with courage. So when you feel that battle raging inside of you, remember you're not alone. Every person you admire has fought this same fight. And every step you take, every moment you choose to show up, is proof that you're stronger than you think. This is your battlefield, and it's also your proving ground. Life is full of choices, but one of the most pivotal decisions we face over and over again is this: do I choose courage or do I choose comfort? It's a question that shapes who we are and determines the path we take. Comfort is enticing. It feels safe, familiar, and predictable. It's the voice in our heads that says, stay where you are. Don't risk failure. Don't step out into the unknown. And let's be honest, comfort has its place. We all need moments of rest and security, a chance to catch our breath in a chaotic world. But comfort can also be a trap. It can lull us into a life that's smaller than what we're capable of. When we choose comfort over courage, we let fear dictate our actions. We settle for less, even when something deep inside us knows we're meant for more. Courage, on the other hand, is a risk. It's stepping out onto uncertain ground, not knowing if the path will hold. It's raising your hand, speaking up, taking that leap even when your heart is pounding and your knees are shaking. Courage asks us to be vulnerable. And let's not sugarcoat it, vulnerability is hard. It means opening ourselves up to failure, criticism, and disappointment. But here's the paradox: while courage feels risky, it's the only path to growth. Comfort may keep us safe in the short term, but it can't take us anywhere new. To build a meaningful life, to reach for our dreams, and to become the best version of ourselves, we have to choose courage over and over again. Choosing courage means being willing to fail. And yes, failure can be painful. It stings our pride and challenges our sense of worth. But every failure carries a lesson, a spark of wisdom that we can use to grow. The greatest achievements in life aren't born from avoiding failure, they're born from facing it head on, learning from it, and trying again. Courage isn't always dramatic. It's not always about grand gestures or public acts of bravery. Sometimes courage is quiet. It's having an honest conversation when it would be easier to stay silent. It's admitting that you need help. It's showing up when you feel like an imposter or starting over when you're afraid it's too late. And here's the thing about courage: it's contagious. When we see someone else take a brave step, it inspires us to do the same. When we choose courage, we don't just change our own lives, we create ripples that can change the lives of others. The choice between courage and comfort isn't a one-time decision. It's a choice we make every day, in big ways and small. It's waking up and asking yourself, what am I willing to risk today for the sake of growth? What small step can I take toward the person I want to be? Yes, courage is uncomfortable, but discomfort is the price of transformation. When you step out of your comfort zone, you discover strengths you didn't know you had. You prove to yourself that you can survive the fall and even learn to soar. So the next time you're faced with a choice, ask yourself, do I want to stay safe or do I want to grow? Because growth only happens when we're willing to lean into the discomfort, to embrace the uncertainty, and to say, I don't know how this will end, but I'm willing to try. Courage may not guarantee success, but it guarantees a life lived fully. It's not the easy path, but it's the path that leads to purpose, connection, and a legacy worth leaving behind. Choose courage over comfort, not just once, but every day. Because when you do, you step into the extraordinary life that's waiting for you beyond the walls of fear. We live in a world that often celebrates perfection, hustle, and relentless achievement. We're told to aim higher, push harder, and never let them see us sweat. In the process, we develop an inner critic, a voice that holds us to impossible standards and punishes us when we fall short. This voice tells us we're not good enough, not smart enough, not worthy enough. But here's the truth: the inner critic doesn't help us grow. It doesn't push us toward greatness. Instead, it wears us down, chipping away at our confidence and sense of self-worth. That's where self-compassion comes in, not as a weakness, but as a quiet, revolutionary strength. Self-compassion isn't about making excuses or letting ourselves off the hook. It's not about avoiding accountability or settling for mediocrity. Self-compassion is about treating ourselves with the same kindness and understanding that we'd offer a dear friend. It's about recognizing that we are human, that we are imperfect, and that this imperfection is what makes us beautifully, authentically ourselves. Let's start with the basics. Self-compassion has 3 core elements. Self-kindness. Self-kindness means speaking to yourself gently, especially in moments of failure or struggle. Think about how you'd comfort a friend who feels defeated. Would you berate them or tell them they're worthless? Of course not. You'd remind them of their strengths, their worth, and the fact that everyone stumbles sometimes. Why then do we deny ourselves the same grace? Common humanity. This is the understanding that struggle is a universal human experience. We often feel isolated in our pain, as though no one else has ever failed, been rejected, or felt lost. But the truth is, we all face challenges. Self-compassion helps us remember that we're not alone in our imperfections. We are part of a shared humanity, and that connection is a source of strength. Mindfulness. Mindfulness means acknowledging our pain without exaggerating or minimizing it. It's about being present with our feelings, understanding where they come from, and choosing not to let them define us. Instead of avoiding discomfort or drowning in self-pity, mindfulness helps us sit with our emotions, learn from them, and let them pass. Mindfulness isn't easy in a world that encourages distraction. It takes effort to pause, reflect, and truly feel what we're going through. But when we practice mindfulness, we create space for self-compassion. We allow ourselves to process our emotions without judgment, which leads to greater clarity and understanding. When we practice self-compassion, we create a foundation for resilience. Life will knock us down. It's not a matter of if, but when. Without self-compassion, we might stay down, believing that our failures are a reflection of our worth. But with self-compassion, we can rise again. We can acknowledge our mistakes without letting them define us. Think about how you've treated yourself in difficult moments. Have you been your harshest critic or your greatest ally? Many of us default to criticism because we've been conditioned to believe that's how we improve. But research shows that self-compassion is a far more effective motivator than self-criticism. When we're kind to ourselves, we're more likely to take clicks, learn from failure, and pursue growth. Self-compassion also strengthens our relationships. When we're kinder to ourselves, we become more understanding of others. We stop expecting perfection from the people around us because we've stopped expecting it from ourselves. This creates deeper, more authentic connections, free from judgment and unrealistic expectations. And here's an important truth: self-compassion doesn't mean we stop striving. In fact, it empowers us to strive in a healthier, more sustainable way. When we're not paralyzed by fear of failure, we can set bold goals and pursue them with courage. We can take risks because we know that even if we fall, we'll treat ourselves with kindness and get back up. Practicing self-compassion is a daily choice. It's a mindset we cultivate, not something that happens overnight. Start by noticing your self-talk. Pay attention to the words you use when you make a mistake or fall short. Are they words of encouragement or condemnation? If they're harsh, pause and ask yourself, would I say this to a friend? Next, embrace your humanity. When you feel like you've failed, remind yourself that you're not alone. Everyone struggles, and everyone deserves grace, including you. Finally, be mindful of your emotions. Let yourself feel them without judgment. They're not weaknesses, they're part of being human. Self-compassion isn't selfish, it's the opposite. When we care for ourselves, we're better equipped to care for others. We can't pour from an empty cup, and self-compassion fills us up. It reminds us that we are worthy of love and kindness, not because of what we achieve, but because of who we are. Vulnerability is often viewed as a weakness in our society, a place where we're exposed, unprotected, and open to hurt. We're told that vulnerability is something to avoid, something that puts us at risk of rejection, failure, or humiliation. Yet paradoxically, vulnerability is not the enemy of strength, it is the birthplace of resilience. Resilience is the ability to bounce back from adversity, to navigate life's storms with strength, grace, and perseverance. But resilience doesn't come from shutting ourselves off from pain or avoiding difficult emotions. It is born from our willingness to embrace vulnerability, our capacity to show up authentically, to be seen in our most raw, unpolished form, and to face hardship with openness and courage. Think about it, resilience doesn't mean we never feel fear, grief, or doubt. It doesn't mean we never fail or experience setbacks. True resilience arises when we acknowledge our vulnerabilities, our fear of failure, of rejection, our doubts, and decide to continue moving forward anyway. Vulnerability is not about being weak, it's about being brave enough to acknowledge our humanness, to face our emotions, and to keep going despite the challenges. When we embrace vulnerability, we acknowledge that life isn't about being perfect, it's about being real. We open ourselves to the possibility of growth that comes from facing our fears head-on. When we refuse to shy away from the uncomfortable emotions that vulnerability brings, we find that we can navigate through the storms with more strength and clarity. Vulnerability allows us to confront what's holding us back, to uncover our fears, our doubts, our insecurities, and begin the work of transforming them. But this isn't an easy process. It takes courage to be vulnerable. It requires us to drop our walls, to show the parts of ourselves that we often hide, and to trust that we can handle whatever comes our way. We might feel exposed, like we're standing at the edge of a cliff, not knowing if we will fall or soar. But here's the truth: standing at the edge is where growth happens. It's in the moments of discomfort, of uncertainty, that we discover what we're truly made of. Vulnerability at its core is about opening ourselves up to the possibility of connection. It's about allowing ourselves to be seen, heard, and understood for who we truly are, not the polished, perfect versions of ourselves, but the messy, imperfect humans we are at our core. And connection is a powerful force for resilience. When we allow ourselves to be vulnerable with others, we create space for genuine relationships, ones that are built on trust, authenticity, and mutual understanding. It's in these vulnerable connections that we find the strength to rise again after we've fallen, knowing that we're not alone, that others have faced similar struggles, and that we are worthy of love and support gives us the courage to keep moving forward. Vulnerability builds bridges between us. It's how we relate to one another, how we share our pain, our joy, our triumphs, and our losses. And through these connections, we build the emotional reserves that fuel our resilience. Vulnerability also allows us to process and heal from our wounds. When we face our vulnerabilities, when we express our pain, we release the power that shame, fear, and unprocessed emotions hold over us. Vulnerability is the antidote to isolation. It frees us from the belief that we must be perfect to be loved or accepted. It reminds us that we are enough just as we are. But vulnerability requires practice. It's easy to hide behind a mask, to play the role of someone who has it all together, to keep our true selves hidden away for fear of being judged. But by avoiding vulnerability, we miss out on the opportunity for true connection and growth. The more we allow ourselves to be vulnerable, the more we allow ourselves to heal, grow, and build resilience. This is where courage comes in. Vulnerability is not about being fearless, it's about being willing to face our fears and keep going anyway.